The last time my hopes were this high for a movie was for Across the Spider-Verse, and somehow they did it again. Welcome to Sandwich Reviews. I'm the Talking Sentient Sandwich, and I can't believe Denis Villeneuve was able to bring it home with Part 2 of Dune. Since the release of Part 1, I have read Frank Herbert's novel, so none of the events of this movie were a surprise to me, yet everything was still given narrative weight, to the point where I felt like it was the first time I was experiencing this story. It truly felt like a religious experience to watch the movie. Over the course of it, I became enraptured by the gospel of Paul Muad'Dib Atreides, and even I was ready to fight for the Fremen. But in all seriousness, it really did give me goosebumps. As I'll cover later, I think it could have had a lot more emotional impact from its characters, but that didn't take away from just how captivating the film was. I had already bought into this universe and how it looked, so I was immediately gripped when we started right back up from where we left, hence parts 1 and 2. And there was no way that this entire story could have been told in one singular movie, so I'm definitely glad for its split. I mean, they couldn't even fit everything from the books into these movies, and they almost had Lord of the Rings extended edition runtimes. And in that runtime, everyone brought their A game when it came to acting and production, for all the new characters and the returning ones. I can't think of a single person that stuck out as bad compared to the others, almost as if the acting elevated the production, elevating the acting further. It was a feedback loop that just left my jaw on the floor for half the movie. Actually, now that I think about it, I think that feedback loop might have had a little help from something that kind of made the movie for me. And it's not the cinematography, though that will come up later, because that's phenomenal. It was the music. Hans Zimmer's orchestral musings were out of this world in Part 1, and he brought it again in Part 2. I can't say much else without spoiling everything, but I'll say that if you call yourself a sci-fi fan, you gotta check this movie out. Now let's talk spoilers. You have been warned. I thought that Stilgar was the perfect personification of the effects religion and belief have on a person and the hold that it can take on them. Every step that Paul took only made him believe in this prophecy that much more. I mean, Paul said one sentence about a green paradise and this man was on his knees crying. Sir, those tears are water from your body. What are you doing? I mean, I get it. It was a really cool moment. There were plenty other people directly affected by the prophecy of Paul Muad'Dib, and Paul even singles one man out during a speech, which I thought was really engaging, but Stilgar was the best example of this for me. Sadly, there were bad examples, such as Paul and Johnny themselves. Is there enough emotional weight behind Paul and Johnny's relationship? I believe them as a couple, but when Paul had to marry the Emperor's daughter for political reasons at the end, it wasn't much of a sacrifice. I wanted to feel the tragedy of their love come crashing down around them, but I didn't feel that when Johnny stormed off. Her character had always been stoic to a point, but there still should have been genuine love felt between them, and I'm not sure if I ever felt that. Maybe their relationship and the scene at the end where they split will have more emotional resonance on a rewatch, but that was my initial takeaway. And speaking of emotional resonance, I wonder if Paul himself is a good protagonist to root for in the first place. He was the typical hero, going on his hero's journey in the last movie, and for a time that's the case in Part 2, but then he takes some warm blood that makes him trip even more than he was already tripping on spice, and now he's constantly seeing every possible future as clear as if it were happening now. That's a really cool concept that they executed incredibly well, but I'm not sure if that's a good person to try and make the audience put their shoes into. It's just hard to be emotionally invested in someone like that. It's possible, but it's much easier to root for the young underdog who lost his whole family, which is what he starts the movie out as. That's also why the franchise goes in the direction it does in the books. Before his transformation, the majority of the movie leads up to Paul taking on the prophet persona, showing his fear at the idea of it. Even before getting high on warm blood, he knew that once he went south, the holy war would start. And there is real weight behind Paul not wanting to fulfill his destiny. But once the decision is made, that's kind of it for Paul's emotional journey. It's captivating as hell to see the epic battle at the end. I mean, the Sardaukar never even stood a chance. And then they topped the knife battle that concluded Part 1 by showing the duel between Feyd-Rautha and Paul, perfectly executed. The cinematography and stunt work were so phenomenal, and the backlighting could not have been better. On that note, throughout the entire runtime, the cinematography is next level, and it really steps up whenever we're seeing something from a dream or a big ol' worm. However, there was one thing that I thought was a weird decision. About 5 or 6 times in the movie, a scene would transition to a blinding light and I couldn't help but be taken aback. That may have been the point for the hard transition, going from the dark underground to the harsh light of the desert, but doing it so many times just hurt my eyes. But other than that, and the lack of emotional weight that I will probably change my opinion on after a second or even third watch, I think you can put this on the list of Villeneuve's masterpieces. And as always, thanks for watching. Make sure to leave a like, subscribe, and enjoy a delicious sandwich.